Hello and welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, specifically from the area we call the Bell Tower. We have a big tower, and the main entrance to the church, is located at its base. And this room has some plaques that honor people who have served in the military since World War I up to the present day. And the entrance behind me over here goes into the narthex, into the sanctuary, and in the other direction is the way into the Sunday school wing. But behind me, there is another secret door. Well, it's not actually all that secret. It's right there, but it's usually locked. We're going to be talking about this in a minute. It's the area that gives the bell tower its name. Ta-da! It's called foreshadowing. But before I get to that, it'll all make sense eventually if you stick with the video. But I want to begin with something that doesn't talk directly about a bell tower. It talks about what happened the week after Easter. It comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, starting at verse 13. It says, "Now on that same day, two of them," meaning two of Jesus' followers, "were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about the things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him, and he said to them, 'What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?' They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, 'Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?' He asked them, 'What things?' They replied, 'The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it's now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see him.' Then he said to them, 'Oh, how foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared! Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer all these things and then enter into his glory?' Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on, but they urged him strongly, saying, 'Stay with us, because it's almost evening and the day is now nearly over.' So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to one another, 'Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?' That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and there found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, 'The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon.' Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. And so now let's remember that and come back to it in a little bit. But first, I wanted to tell you a little story, and it involves a bell tower. Let's go pay a visit, and I'll tell you the story from up there. So, once upon a time, high up in the Swiss Alps, there was a little village that had a church with a bell tower, and atop the bell tower, a steeple where the bell hung that would ring out across the entire valley. And there was a man whose job it was to ring the bell. He would come up into a room like this with a rope, and he would pull on the bell every time there was a service, every time there was a special event, anytime the community needed to be gathered together in the square below. He would come, he would pull the rope, he would ring the bell and ring the bell and let it go and ring the bell and call people together for years and years and years. He did that from a room much like this one, but built of stone and with stairs instead of ladders like ours. But then came the day when early in the morning nobody heard the bell, and it was discovered that he had passed away in his sleep the night before. So they began to think. Everyone loved him, and they wanted to gather people together for his funeral in a couple of days. But they didn't have anyone to ring the bell, to call people together, or to announce the service. What were they to do? They thought, at least let's find someone temporary who will be able to ring the bell. Word went out up and down the valley that the village needed a new Kapellmeister. And quickly, the next day, a man they had never seen before came into the village and let everyone know that he was there to apply for the job. They gathered the town council and the mayor together. The problem was that this man had no arms. And the council looked together and they put their heads together, and the mayor spoke for them and said, "We don't know how you're going to ring the bell without arms." And the man said, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." They said, "Well, at least tell us about yourself. What we don't know you. What's going on here?" And he said, "Listen, you don't trust me, I understand. Before I even tell you my name, I will give you a demonstration that I know what I'm doing." Well, they wanted to be fair to him, so they said, "All right." And up the stairs they went, and they reached the room with the rope for the bells and said, "How are you to grasp the rope?" He said, "Don't worry about that. I'm going all the way up to the next level. We have a ladder, they had steps." Up he went. And when he got to the top, he looked at the bell and he went over to it and he pressed his forehead against the bell and he got it swinging a little bit, and he went that way and he kept it up until the clapper would ring the actual bell, and it went bong out over the entire village, and it came back and he put his forehead against it again and he got it going a little bit stronger, and bong it went, and it rang out again even louder, and he kept up the pace and kept up the pace until it was ringing out just as it always had across the whole valley. And as that happened, the people were so amazed. They started applauding and clapping for him and shouting. And one more time, he ran at it. And as they applauded, he looked down to see them, and the bell came and it swung back at him. It knocked him out of the steeple, and he plunged to the square below and died. Of course, everyone rushed out to the town square to see what was going on, and the horrified people who were out there listening when the whole thing had begun gathered round them. The mayor looked down and he felt terrible about himself. He said, This is just, I don't know what to say. We allowed this to happen, and we don't know who the man was. We don't know his family. How do we even notify anyone to come and take care of this? And that's when one of the counselors spoke up and said, Herr Mayor, it is a problem. We do not know his name, but his face rings a bell. I'm embarrassed to admit that that's not even the end of that story, but that's a good stopping point. And I'm going to leave it there, and I'll spare you. But the point of even telling it is that I know that someone, either hearing this in church on Sunday morning or out there on the interwebs, has heard this story before and the sequel, and has been sitting there politely thinking, oh no, not this old one. And somebody else who is hearing it for the first time may be thinking, you know what? I've got to remember this for the next time I see so and so, because he really loves dumb jokes. And yes, this is a dumb joke, but it has a point. The point I'm making is that our brains are built to make connections. And more often than we realize, there will be something that rings a bell, that sets things off, so that we realize what may be going on behind the scenes, what might be just out of sight. And we have one of those aha moments. It happens when the punchline of a joke arrives, but it happens at other times. Moments when we say, oh, okay, I get it. That was her sister. Or, I always thought he was up to something. Or, okay, now it all makes sense. And on the road to Emmaus, two thoroughly disappointed disciples of Jesus, not part of the inner circle, not the 11, as Luke says. There were 12, but by this point, Judas was gone. So these two disciples, familiar with what had happened to Jesus, familiar with Jesus himself, were plodding home, sharing their grief, sharing their loss. And when a stranger came up and struck up a conversation with them, they were thinking, Luke says, about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. And in their words, they were thinking about how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. And that was when the stranger began to help them make those connections, those small moments and those large moments that would stitch their hope back together. He reminded them of things that they'd already heard in the scriptures. And he helped them hear those things in a new way, a way that spoke of a Messiah who would overcome through suffering, not through violence. He helped them see that Jesus had undergone things that pointed not to defeat, but that were in fact the fullest testimony of God's love. And he knew what he was talking about because it was Jesus himself who spoke to them, who said, "Oh, how foolish you are, how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Wasn't it necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Bells began to go off. Bells began to ring in their heads. Later they would say, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" Things were ringing a bell. And what finally clinched things for them, that last loud clap of the bell that was ringing, was what happened when they reached their destination and they invited him to be their guest. When he was at table with them, he took bread, blessed, and broke it and gave it to them. Their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. That was the moment for them. They recognized Jesus, and he reminded them. They remembered him, and he reminded them. It went together. They remembered him by the way that he had told his disciples to remember him. That night when they were all gathered together for one last supper, only now they knew it wasn't truly the last supper, but they just had supper with him. Now they knew that when he said, "Wherever 2 or 3 of his followers gather together in his name, he would be among them." He had been there and really would be among them. It hadn't ended. It would be true on the road. It would be true around the dinner table. It has continued to be true in prisons and hospital rooms and summer camps and Sunday school picnics and on street corners and in playgrounds and in thousands of places we would never expect. It rings a bell. Keep your eyes and ears open, folks. It may be that you find yourself somewhere in some position, good or bad, where something totally unexpected and totally wonderful happens. And suddenly there will be life and joy in the room, and you will know that Jesus has been there. And maybe you'll know that he's there with you still. Something just rings a bell. Amen. So the second part of the joke is that a couple days later, another man comes into the village and says that he's the brother of the man that applied for the job and was killed, and that he wanted to just finish the ringing job that the man had begun in honor of him. And he wouldn't tell them anything, and just like his brother, he wouldn't tell them anything. But he went up, and in honor of his brother, he goes up into the bell tower, and he does the same sort of thing, and he hits it with his head. But he was less practiced than the other one was, and the bell again swung back, and he didn't know to get out of the way, and he too was killed by a terrible plunge from the top of the bell tower, from the steeple. And everyone once again gathered around and looked, and someone said, "Who was this one?" And somebody in the crowd says, "We don't know this one either, but we do know he was a dead ringer for his brother."